This is why Hazel is willing to be sassy and outgoing. She's joking around with her higher ups, making up stories about fruitcakes and weddings in Harlem. I started watching this show on Hulu. I finished it in about a day. But let's keep in mind, I got into this show completely blind. I had never ever seen a trailer. I had never read the book. I didn't know what I was getting into. I knew it might have been a little bit creepy because it seemed dark, but let's keep in mind I went into this completely blind. You could literally imagine the absolute confusion I was in when I saw that these women were being lured into this cult by hair grease. It was hair grease. Like, I was so confused. But obviously, it wasn't that simple. It was a lot more multi layered than I thought. The hair grease obviously symbolized something a lot deeper, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But I was reading this article on Vox.com, and I love how they kind of compare the other black girl to Stepford Wives. It was really interesting. So they said, based on the 2021 novel by Zakiya Dalila Harris, the other black girl works like a Stepford Wives for black women. On one side of the aisle are the non robots, people like the main character Nella, who, as the show begins, wears Peter Pan collars and sensible cardigans, a baby afro, and a face bare of makeup. On the other side are the people who aren't quite robots, but who do seem too cool to be normal people. Like Hazel, the new girl at Nella's office, who wears her hair in long dramatic locks and sports floral blazers in editorial shapes. So if you've ever seen the Stepford Wives, you'd recognize why the comparison makes so much sense, as the Stepford Wives was a commentary on traditional gender roles, and the other black girl is more so of a commentary on black womanhood. Where one asks, what does it mean to be a woman? The other is more specifically asking, what does it mean to be a black woman? And we can even get more specific and say it's questioning what it means to be a successful black woman in corporate America. So I do like to dive into the plot a little bit and just let you guys know what exactly went on throughout the show. So just a little recap. The other black girl follows the life of Nella as she maneuvers working in white corporate America. As you could imagine, she deals with her fair share of annoyances, mainly in the form of microaggressions, your unseasoned potluck here and there. And if things don't suck enough at her place of work, her one friend at her job, who happens to also be a woman of color, I believe she's Asian, ends up quitting. So when Hazel, a black woman like herself, gets hired, she is thrilled at the possibility that they'll be cool. They don't have to be best friends, but maybe she'll have someone to commiserate with at the very least. Now, in comparison to Nella, who is for the most part reserved, and she's really just trying. That was rude. Now, Hazel is literally nothing like Nella. Nella literally will wear the blandest colors. She will literally try her best not to stand out. She just wants to blend in with the crowd. We have Hazel, who wears vibrant colors, has long curly locks, and is almost performative in her blackness. Like, I don't know if to say performative, but it's like she acts in a way that is to entertain her white counterparts, but also be digestible. Essentially, she makes herself very easy to like. Like, those girls who are just able to carry a conversation with anyone. They're charming, they got a little sass to them. She's that type of girl. And things start to get weird from the very beginning when Hazel convinces Nella to bring up her concerns with a racist character written in a book by one of their company's clients. Hazel basically tells her she should speak her mind, and she gives her the impression that when she does speak her mind, she's going to have her back. Now, a little backstory on this. Nella and Hazel work at this publishing company, and one of the company's top authors wrote a book with a character who was very much offensive, and Nella expresses this to Hazel, and Hazel seems to also be a little bit offended by this character in the book, right? But when it all comes down to it, Nella doesn't seem like she's actually gonna tell this guy how she feels, because her boss, her higher up, literally tells her, don't give your opinion, this is not a good idea. So she decides, you know what, maybe I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut. Well, Hazel puts her on the spot, and Hazel's like, Nella, don't you have something to say? And Nella's like, no, not really. She's like, don't you? I thought you had an opinion. And Nella's like, she's just pressing her. And Nella's like, okay, so this is my opinion. And Hazel sugarcoats the fact that the character in question was literally gonna offend a ton of black people. This character in question is literally somebody that you would see in some racist comedy show. It was not something that black people would be excited to see. In fact, it would have offended a lot of people. But Hazel sugarcoats that, and the way she responds to Nella questioning, the way she handled that situation is probably the first time that we are going to see how Hazel maneuvers through white spaces. She says something like, you could catch more bees with honey or something like that. Or some more flies with honey. She says that, it's maybe sometimes it's better to sugarcoat things. And regardless of Nella being taken aback by all of this, she continues to trust Hazel and she just forgives her. Then they make this truce that they're going to have each other's back from here on out. And it actually does seem to be the case that Hazel does have Nella's back and vice versa. She seemingly goes out of her way to make sure that she gets credit for her ideas, and she invites her to networking events. But when Hazel drops off work that Nella forgot at the office, at Nella's house, which is literally all the way across town. Like, she lives in maybe an hour and a half away from her. So one of them is all the way in the Bronx and the other one is in Long Island. It's they're literally far away from each other. So this kind of creeps Nella out. Obviously, she's like, why would you go out of your way to come all the way to my house? It just has it gives her this uneasiness. And she even tells her boyfriend, this is kind of weird. And her boyfriend's like, don't worry about it. You just feel like she's too nice and there's no such thing as too nice. He should have just listened to her, to be honest. Either way, she just kind of trusts that, maybe Hazel's not a big creepo. But also, let's not forget that Hazel actually is so creepy. She literally appears to be watching her. There's a scene of her standing at the bottom, looking up at her window, standing down on the street, looking up because her window's on the 3rd floor or something. She's looking up at her window. It's so creepy. There's the scene of the blood coming out of her scalp. There's just so much creepy shit surrounding Hazel. And on top of that, even her friend Malika tells her, this Hazel girl's kind of nutty. She's kind of weird. I don't trust her. She's sus. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. Hazel's not a bad person. Hazel's just really, really nice. Now, what's the deal with the hair grease? Okay? What's the deal with the hair grease? From the very beginning of the show, there are subtle references to black female representation. Hazel is subtly changing things about Nella's personal style. And while Hazel may offer advice in clothing and makeup, it takes her a while to actually touch Nella's hair. But even still, without her saying it, we as viewers can tell that it's about to happen. We can just feel it. There's so much foreshadowing going on in this show. The scenes of Kendra Ray Phillips, the woman who used to work at her office, even the scene of Diana Gordon, the woman who's running the whole operation, coming into the bathroom and putting some mystery product on her scalp. We just know that the hair grease is about to get brought up. We just know that it has something to do with something. We know it. Can you please get your butt out of the way? So you guys heard me mention Kendra Ray Phillips and Diana Gordon. Those are both very important characters in the series as well. Kendra Ray Phillips was the first black female editor at Wagner Books, who people refuse to talk about what actually happened to for a good portion of the show. And Diana Gordon is the author of Nella's favorite book, Burning Heart, the book that single-handedly inspired Nella to work at Wagner Books in the first place. She's also the head of the entire hair grease operation. And funny enough, the book Burning Heart has a lot of controversy behind it, and it started this whole feud between Kendra Ray Phillips and Diana Gordon. So there's this hair party at some point in the show, and that's when the hair grease finally gets introduced to Nella. Thank God Malika was there. But we come to realize that the hair grease essentially just numbs these women to racism in the workplace and enables them to work with the system instead of against it. Every woman who uses this hair product is acceptable to white people, and has respect among their white counterparts, or so it seems. Maybe it's not so much that they have the respect. Maybe the hair grease changes their perception so they feel like they have the respect of their white counterparts. And I noticed that no one who used the hair grease wore their hair naturally. This is very important to note. Like, Hazel somewhat wears her hair in a natural style, but Hazel's hair doesn't matter. She changes her hair according to each victim. She changed her hair according to each person she was trying to recruit. She went from bangs to curls to locks, all depending on who it was she was targeting. I feel like when it comes to the whole Nella situation, maybe she wore locks because she felt like a more natural style would be more, I want to say, attractive to Nella. Maybe she thought that it might have been easier for Nella to trust her because, people with natural hair most likely would take products from people who also have natural hair. Maybe that's how they looked at it. Maybe that's why she had the locks in. But the deeper we get into the season, the more we understand what the hair grease symbolizes. It's supposed to make Black women more passive, but still willing to perform blackness if it means entertaining white people. This is why Hazel is willing to be sassy and outgoing. She's joking around with her higher-ups, making up stories about fruitcakes and weddings in Harlem. But then is also willing to shrink herself and water down her opinion when it comes to an overtly racist book. And I say what the hair grease symbolizes because as I finished the season, it became questionable that it was the hair grease itself that was changing these women's lives. No, it was the conformity. That's what opened doors for them. It's clearly implied when Nella makes that phone call at the end, like at the very last episode, that she didn't actually use the grease. Yet the fact that she's thrown on a lace front, put on a cute outfit, has a full face of makeup on, and is just acting like she's above it all. Now it's perceived that she did in fact use the grease. Because the point of the grease is to show up and never be too loud about your blackness, never be too loud about pain that results from being Black in America. It is to, instead of questioning why your hair is seen as unkempt in its natural state, to just put on a lace front. Relax it, straighten it, cover it up. It is to, instead of expressing your rightful opinion, to sugarcoat it or silence yourself. The fact that the grease was causing itching and the burning and the itching and the bleeding, and the women using it didn't even really know what was in it. They didn't know the ingredients. It kind of reminded me of relaxer and all the unknown ingredients in relaxer, all the shit we can't pronounce in it, and the fact that people are still willing to put it on their hair if it just makes things a little bit easier. If people just question you a little bit less about your hair. Even when Hazel, or whatever her name was at the time when she had put on the grease for the first time and started burning and everything, even when she said to Diana Gordon, is it supposed to be burning like this? I don't know. This feels like my head is on fire. Diana Gordon's like, did you use enough though? It's like you have that dependency on it. That reminded me of relaxer and the fact that you can't go too long without doing it again or else your hair feels rough and unmanageable. Well, I don't even know why I'm doing air quotes because it actually does damage your hair. The fact that they call it the creamy crack, like all of that it just reminded me of relaxer in that way, and the fact that none of these women looked natural after. Yeah, it was sus. It was sus for sure. But something I wanted to explore here, like, is this a tired concept? Using Black women's hair as a metaphor for assimilation into white settings? Because I was reading an article on Slate magazine where they spoke about this. It was called "It's Time to Retire the Black Women Hair Trope in Film and TV." And check out this article because it's really, really interesting. But I do like the fact that they said this at the end, right? They said, ask different questions like, why do we hyperfixate on Black women's hair and then shame them for making a choice? As if we're the only group using these methods. Or, why do Black creators seem to focus exclusively on the trauma involved in Black hair care rather than the beauty we create with it? Maybe my hair and my choices don't need to be a plotline in your horror story. Maybe, just maybe, you need to remember the eternal wisdom. Mind your business. So yeah, that article, just check it out. I agreed with a lot that was said in that article because I did still have some concerns with the show. Even though it was quite entertaining, I had my concerns with it, especially just the tiring ass trope Like, we saw this in bad hair and all that stuff where it's just getting kind of boring now. I can stand by a lot of what is mentioned in that article, and to be honest, there were other things that bothered me as well, like the fact that they just had to make the black women against black women trope happen. Like, they just had to make that happen. Like, of course Nella has this black woman as her role model, and she just so happens to be evil as well. Like, of course, of course. Maybe they could have just made it a point to show how microaggressions in the workplace create this mindset where successful black women think they're doing the right thing. Maybe they could have made that a point and like really emphasize the fact that women, I might actually think they're doing the right thing by advising other women to assimilate. Like, it's really not our fault at the end of the day. So that's why I could really agree. Thanks, Cola. So that's why I could really understand where the writer of this article is coming from when they say that we really just do need to mind our business at the end of the day, because our issues are so much deeper than our hair and how we choose to wear it. Sometimes it feels like these shows are created not to make a real statement, but to remind black women that they can't trust anyone, not even each other, which isn't really the case. And even the idea that Hazel was just too nice, I'm not saying she didn't do anything. I'm not saying she wasn't creepy. I'm not saying that she wasn't questionable. But Malika suspected her literally just because she was nice. And I think that's something that we see commonly in the black community. We as black people are wary of people who are too kind. And I think it's a fucked up way to look at life. There are plenty of people who are actually out here looking out for each other, who want to see each other win in the black community without selling their souls. And there are also white people who are not racist. Throughout the show, I was under the impression that Nella was being framed to be perceived as stupid. Like, I felt like the writers and the directors wanted us to see Nella as an idiot for trusting Hazel. But I don't think she would be stupid for trusting her. I mean, she was kind of in a vulnerable position. She was the only black person at her job. And to see another black woman around the same age as her in that space as well, I think any of us would have, jumped at that opportunity to feel a little bit more normal. So, yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. And thank you guys so much for watching. If this is your first time tuning into my channel, my name is Missy and I make commentary videos. I also like to do a little bit of vlogging here and there, although I haven't done that in a while. I'm thinking about making a separate vlogging channel, but definitely subscribe if you haven't already. Like this video if you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think. Have you seen the show? Do you plan on watching it? I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Hugs.